Squamish.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so I think what we'll do is I'm going to keep this poll just running a little bit longer and we will dive into what we're chatting about today. So, here we go. So welcome everyone. Happy Friday, Friday of the May long weekend. We are going to present to you today on motor milestones and baby equipment. And so I just want to start off by letting you know that this webinar is being recorded so that people who aren't able to tune in live can watch it later. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A box and we will get to as many as we can at the end of our talk. And then also have the chat box open and set it to all panelists and attendees so that we can see your comments in the chat.
Wonderful.
Okay, so let's introduce ourselves. My name is Megan Mack and I am a physiotherapist and I'm also the owner of Playworks Physio. I went to physio school at UBC and I've been working in pediatrics for the past 6 years, both in private practice and also at a child development center locally. When I'm not working, I'm chasing around my busy 1-year-old son, and it's actually his birthday today. And so throughout this presentation, I'm going to take you through the last 12 months of Cohen's physical development. So you'll get to see how he's been developing and growing over the past year.
He's in the spotlight. And hi everyone, I'm Carly. I am one of the physios at Playworks. I'm originally from Ontario, so shout out to all those Ontario families joining the webinar today. I know there's a lot of you. I moved out to the West Coast 4 years ago, and since then I've been working in private practice in the Lower Mainland as well as at BC Children's Hospital in the public community. And when I'm not in the clinic, I'm outside playing in the mountains, skiing, hiking, biking, all the rest, enjoying everything that the West Coast has to offer.
Okay, so the goals of today's talk are going to be that you guys learn some of the main gross motor milestones that your baby will gain throughout their first year. And I want you guys to pay attention and really notice how each skill builds upon one another throughout all of the milestones. We're also going to go through some strategies that you guys can use at home when playing with your baby to help them reach these skills. And then throughout the talk, we will highlight some of our favorite toys for babies and how you can use these in play to help with developing these milestones. And then at the end, we're going to chat about some common pieces of baby equipment and then the recommendations for their use. And like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to type them into our Q&A box.
Wonderful. So what is pediatric physio? So physios in general are movement specialists. So a peds physio is a movement specialist, but for kids. So pediatric physios have had their hands on a lot of little bodies, which are quite different to adults. So pediatric PTs know what typical development looks like. They know what atypical development looks like, and they have seen a lot of wild and wonderful and weird forms of development that happens with kids, as well as kids with disabilities, kids with diseases, and the rest. So in clinic, my youngest patient has been less than 48 hours old. And so often I'm asked, what do you do with a baby in physio, let alone a 2-day-old baby? So often we see babies for torticollis. So if there's a preference for looking to one side, parents will also come in often with concerns if their baby's head is flat on one side or at the back. Also motor milestone check-ins, making sure that they're getting the right skills at the right ages and kind of helping parents with what you can do to play in those positions and encourage that movement development. Also, we get a lot of first-time parents who are looking for ways to, how do I purposefully play with my baby? And just, they want to learn information from a reliable source because there is a lot on the web these days. And lots of families have extended benefits through work, which cover physio. So we get a lot of families that will tend to come in every so often for a check-in to get ideas on supporting healthy development and kind of have their questions answered. So our clinic is in Port Moody, BC, and we've been there for 2 years now. And for anyone who's not in the area, you'll be pleased to know that most extended benefits now cover virtual therapy. So we're actually able to see kids across Canada online now, which is really neat. And not only do we treat babies, we also see kids for all sorts of sprains, strains, growing pains, funky running patterns, in-toeing, tiptoe walking, as well as kids with special needs such as cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and the rest.
All right. So I'm going to end our geography poll right now. So it looks like it's really cool to see where you guys are all calling in from. So I'm going to end that one. And I'm actually going to put out another poll because we're really curious to see what age your babies are at right now. So if you can quickly put your answer in, then we'll have an idea of the demographic that we are hanging out with this morning. Lots of the 0 to 3, nice. Good mix. Quite a few people who are just curious and want to learn more about milestones. That's really cool too.
Very cool.
Okay, so it looks like a pretty good mix of ages here. So I'm going to end this one now. And then just type in the chat, who's excited to learn more about milestones? Give me a yes.
He's in the chat.
Oh, we got some woohoos.
Nice. Oh, big yes.
All right, so we're gonna start by going through the milestones in the first year. What we've done is we've actually broken them into smaller chunks of time, and we are going to go through the main skills that we like to see in this age range. And before we really dive into our milestones, I want to mention that these are just approximate timeframes for when to expect these skills. So it's really important to remember that every baby is different and learns skills at their own pace. So when we talk about development, we like to think about it as windows of development for babies to learn these skills, and that there aren't hard exact dates. So for example, most babies learn to walk between 10 to 15 months. So it's not at 12 months they're going to start walking. It can be any time within this range is considered to be normal. And there's earlier time frames in that window and later. So when we start, we're going to go through the 0 to 3 month time frame. And so this is what we're going to look at here. So tummy time. Tummy time, I'm sure that all of you have heard from your doctor, your midwife, your nurse practitioners, your public health nurses, that tummy time is so important. And I like to just start off by making a quick note about tummy time, that it doesn't have to be on a cold, hard floor where you just lay baby down on their own. Tummy time is really anything where they're away from vertical and a little bit towards their tummy. So it can be at different angles and on different surfaces. So this could be carrying baby on their tummies over your forearm. So this is more so when baby is pretty small. You can also have them on your chest and adjust your angle that you're sitting or lying down at, and then also on a play mat. And the big thing with tummy time is we want to get them off of their back and not in swings, car seats, or other baby containers. And right when babe's born is we want to start to implement tummy time throughout the day and just gradually start increasing that time so baby's more comfortable being on their tummy. And so this picture, we're going to go through some of the things that tummy time helps with. So one is that it helps lengthen out what we call physiological flexion. And this flexion is also known as fetal position. And so when baby's in utero, they're really scrunched up. And you can see in this picture here how his knees are tucked up really high, his arms are tucked in, his feet are even a little bit curled. And this picture was taken at 3 days old. So after doing a week of tummy time, just periodically throughout the day, at different angles and on different surfaces, This picture was then taken at 10 days, and you can see how much lower his legs have dropped. So those hip flexors have gradually gotten a little bit stretched and lengthened out by being on his tummy. Tummy time is so important because it helps to strengthen the shoulders and their arms and also their legs. When they're on their tummies, they're pushing into the ground through their arms and through their legs, which also helps to strengthen their core muscles. So if you were to lie on the floor and press your arms and knees into the floor, you would also feel your core muscles activate. So this is one of the ways that tummy time strengthens those core muscles. As baby gets older, you'll notice that they have the ability to hold their head a little bit higher when they're on their tummy and hold it up for longer. One thing I always like to touch upon is how tummy time can help develop the back curve in babies. So when babies are first born, they're born with one curve in their back. So kind of like a really big C shape through their spine. And being on their tummy and lifting their head up, pushing through their arms helps create that normal and natural back curve to develop. So in this picture here, I think you can see my cursor. You can see that as he's on his tummy pushing up through his arms, that he's starting to help form that low back curve here. And also at the back of his neck, he's developing a curve right there. And one more point to how tummy time can help another area of the body is it helps to develop higher acuity vision. So when they lift their head up, their head is actually in a different plane to where their body is. So this starts to develop their vision separate to their body position. And so one way to think about that is if you were to lie on the floor on your tummy, you would see something different than when you lie on the floor and then lift your head up high. So this is one thing that Babe is working on while they're on their tummies. So we often get told in clinic, my baby hates tummy time. Type into the chat if this is something you've experienced or you've heard other moms say that baby just does not like being on their tummies. Right? Tummy time. Yep. All right. So there's some of you there. So lots of families have concerns about this. And so we're going to go through a few different tips that that hopefully will help make tummy time a little bit more enjoyable for both of you. So like I mentioned earlier, you can change the angle that baby's at for being on their tummy. So one thing you can do is you can roll up a receiving blanket, or you can also put a pillow such as like a nursing pillow or a smaller pillow. Sometimes playmats come with a pillow, and in this picture you can actually see one. So if you put that under baby's chest, then it can adjust the angle and make it easier for them to hold their head up. When you're playing on the floor and doing tummy time with your babe, you can change this angle every so often to make it a little bit easier and more challenging, just to keep it interesting for them. And one thing that I love suggesting to parents is when baby starts to fuss, they may be fussing because they're frustrated and they know that they want to be in a different position. Maybe they want to be on their back, or they want to be picked up and get off of their tummies. But rather than instantly picking them up, I challenge you to just prop them up a little bit higher on an incline. So maybe make a bigger roll or a bit of a thicker pillow so that they're still on their tummy, but just in an easier position. And you may notice that they stop crying and they're still doing tummy time. So just changing it up a little bit. Okay. So some toys that we love for tummy time. We really like these mirror toys, and we find that babies like to look at themselves, and they also encourage them to just lift their head up even a little bit so that they can get a quick glance at themselves. Babies also see contrast really well. So contrast books and pattern cards are fun things to include in tummy time. If you take a look at the screen, you can see Carly. That's an example of some pattern cards. And babies, when they're younger, see black and red colors the most. And so that's why often you'll see patterns that are black and white or black and red and white. In this picture, you can see how baby's face is smushed onto the floor. And this is actually really important and a really important thing of tummy time because it's giving them sensory feedback of where their mouths are. So this is crucial for the oral motor development of baby. And this is how babies explore their environments in the first couple of years of their life. So if you have a baby, this is just a safety note. If you have a baby on their tummy when they're this little, please do not leave them unattended just for their safety because they may not have the strength to move their head out of the way if something were to block their airway. Another tip that we find really helpful is to get down to their level. So babies haven't fully developed their distance vision yet, and so it's helpful if you're nice and close so they can see you. And it also encourages them to lift their head a little bit higher. It's really good for social skill development as well. So you'll notice baby makes more eye contact with you. You guys may have a full conversation in babbling, ba-ba-bas, and you may get some social smiles, and it's a great way to bond. I just took a glance at the chat and saw Lindsay's question of how long do we suggest for tummy time? And so this is something where you would start in smaller increments and gradually increase it. So the goal is to eventually get baby to be comfortable on their tummy for about 30 minutes, a 30-minute stretch. But like I said, you have to work up to this. So doing little spurts of tummy time throughout the day. And that was the perfect question, Lindsay, because look what our next slide is. How do I fit tummy time into my day? Between the feeding, the sleeping, the constant naps, and all the diaper changes, when can you fit it in? So one thing that we like to suggest is if you can try to create a routine around tummy time. So for example, after every time you change their diaper, you do a little bit of tummy time. And then this way baby learns the routine and becomes more familiar with it. I found in the mornings that my son was the most alert. And so that's when we would do our longest stretch of tummy time. And then we would add in shorter ones scattered throughout the day. But I found the morning was the easiest when he was happy and really alert. When baby is little, you can add in some tummy time after burping them from a feed. So you can hold them on your chest, and then you can also just slide down your nursing chair a little bit, and you can have a rest, and baby gets a little bit of that inclined tummy time. So it's a win-win for both of you. And then before bath time is another good routine time to add it into your day. And also a time when I like to try naked time with my son. So what you'll notice is that baby might move a lot more and when they're not restricted by their diaper and clothing. So just make sure you have a blanket down, but it's a great way for them to explore moving, and they often will try new skills when they are not restricted. Okay, holding their head in midline is another skill for this age range. And so being able to lie on their back and look straight directly above them is actually tricky. Like they need to develop those neck muscles to be able to keep their head straight like that. So toys that hang overhead, mobiles or those play mats with the toys that hang from above, those are really great because they encourage baby to look straight up. What I like about this picture is that this guy over here is 9 or 10 weeks. These two babes are almost 6 weeks apart. So if he's 9 weeks here, she's about 3.5 weeks. And you can see here that he's looking straight up. So he's gained that strength in the 9 weeks that he's been on Earth. And then this little girl over here, she hasn't quite gotten the strength to just stay completely looking straight up. So that's just a good example of the differences in ages. Okay, hands to mouth, I talked a little bit previously and how it's important for oral motor development. It's also a huge skill for speech development and then later on eating. I wanted to make a quick note here about hand socks and gloves that are commonly put on babies. Type in the chat, write hand socks if you have heard of these or seen them. And I find that these are more common when babies are younger. And so this can make it actually difficult for babies to use their hands fully and really explore with them, put their hands in their mouths, and it can limit the development of their hand muscles. So I challenge you guys to try not to put them on babe all day, especially now that we're getting to the warmer months too.
Okay, 4 to 6 months. So now we're getting into a couple of those bigger moving milestones. You'll start to see things like rolling and sitting in that list that we'll cover, and baby starts to explore a little bit more. So our first one that we have to go over is hands to feet. So this milestone is a really neat one because it's a precursor to rolling from tummy to back. So if you can see in the photo, Meg, can you change the, yeah, there you go, thank you. If you can see in the photo, how this little guy is grabbing his feet. He's working here to strengthen his core, but he's also, that photo on the right there, you can see he's stretching those hamstrings, those muscles at the back of his legs as he's kind of grabbing his feet. It also really helps to engage in that hand-eye coordination. I see my feet, can I grab them with my hand? So you start to see all of these new skills begin to emerge. A good way that you can kind of encourage this is to put toys on feet. They also have these little socks with rattles or crinkly butterflies or whatever you will on them, just to bring attention to their feet. I've also seen some stuff online lately with parents tying balloons that are with helium onto their feet. So when baby kicks, the balloons are flying around. So anything really to get baby to learn that their feet are there and that, hey, I can grab them with my feet. And then that you'll see later that this skill really translates into bigger skills later. So it's an important one. The next one is hands to midline. So this one is working on where is my middle, as well as what happens when I cross my middle. This can be very difficult for a kiddo who has a preference always to look to one way. Their middle might be a little bit more hard to find. So this is a good skill to look for. A toy that we really like for this kind of skill is that O ball that you see that baby on the left has. That one's really good because one, it's light. Two, it's super easy to get those little fingers into those holes and grab it, as opposed to a big solid ball that they have to hold. And it's also super fun. It's a good texture for babies to put in their mouths and lick and drool on. So that's a good one to get. I know they have all sorts of sizes and fun shapes and things like that for those O balls. The next one is rolling. So often it starts from tummy to back first, but it can be the other way as well. And this is the first real rotational skill. So this is important for higher level function, especially when they grow up to be little athletes. So at first, rolling often appears to be by mistake, and they seem super messy and uncoordinated. But as they practice, they start to refine their movements and control, and they begin to assign meaning to their movement. So, hey, if I'm on my tummy and I'm fussing, I don't like it. If I tip over to the side, I can get out of my tummy and I can be on my back, win. So babies start to assign meaning. Also, when babies first learn a skill, it's very common for them to work only to one side. You can type in the chat if your babe only loves to roll one way. But often I'll reassure families that it's okay to work to one side for the skill and the easier side so that they can learn to master the skill and learn what this movement means and associate meaning to it. And then once they get really good at it, then you can challenge them on their more difficult side. You know, if you're trying to challenge them to roll on the hard side, they won't want to do it. They'll stress out, you'll stress out, and so on and so forth. But of course, there's things you want to rule out if your baby is only moving to one side 100% of the time. Good time to just get it checked out, see if everything's good. But it can be, generally speaking, beneficial to work to that one side first. Also, safety tip. Good point to start making sure you don't walk away and leave baby on a change table or on the couch or things like that, because they will unexpectedly probably roll off. So make sure you're close by when you leave babe, because they will start to roll at this kind of age window. The next one is tripod sitting. So babies are up into a whole new position now, and this provides a big input to their vestibular system, their visual system, and their balance. So to start, you'll see babies really tip forward, almost like flat at their feet, and they'll be very unsteady. But as they build strength, they'll start to balance out the control between their front muscles and their back muscles, and they'll learn eventually how to hold their trunk upright in a balanced space. One common question we often get in clinic that we hear all the time is, my baby always throws themselves backwards when they sit. They don't know how to come forward. So some tips for this are to keep their legs nice and wide, to keep their hands down in front of them, and you can sometimes block them or sit behind them so when they come up, they don't shoot backwards. Those are often some of the easy tips. You know, you can pop some pillows around them so that they do learn, hey, when I tip too far back, I'm going to fall. I do want to make a note here that it's super important to not only practice sitting at this stage. It tends to be very exciting. Hey, my baby can sit up, but make sure you practice other things. Practice getting into and out of sitting, practice side sitting, practice sitting on different surfaces so your baby doesn't get stuck in sitting. There we go for sitting. The next one, oh, this photo. Being on your tummy and holding your head up to 90 degrees is a really good one to start to challenge the visual system, as Megan said earlier, and it's now developing higher level control. So you can see in this far too cute photo that his head and his eyes are in a very different, separate position to his body. And as Megan mentioned earlier, this is how the visual system really develops stability and gaze focusing and being able to fix on objects while the body is moving in other directions. It also shows that his core and his shoulders are strong enough to lift his whole heavy head up and support his body in that position. Nice one.
Har, I just saw a good question that may be worth addressing right now in the chat. Someone asked how often they should practice tripod sitting.
So in terms of how often you should practice it, it's going to be the same sort of education that Megan provided earlier, so with tummy time. So you want to, at the beginning, start with small spurts and then eventually work into longer bits of time where your child is in these positions. One of the great things about when babies are on their tummy and when they're learning how to sit is they're not spending a lot of time on the back of their heads. So it's often a really good option to start to do. The big thing is that you can kind of practice it in lots of different positions and areas. So you can gradually build up to spending more time kind of in that. So start with a couple minutes at the beginning, you know, maybe 1 or 2 minutes when they're first learning, and then eventually once they're sitting up independently, which we'll get to now, you'll start to see that they will start to spend longer bits of time in sitting. So then, yay.
Carly, sorry, can I just jump in and ask a question? Sorry, it's Missy. I just see a couple questions about how they can practice getting into the sitting position.
Awesome.
Tricks.
So there are lots of tricks for getting into and out of sitting. Thanks, Missy, for that, by the way. One of the good ones is often getting their hands like toys to the sides of them to get them to rotate. So babies that have done lots of rolling are really good at that rotation and kind of reaching for toys and starting to kind of grab things out of their base of support so their hands are down. As well as a really good one is having babes sit with their sitting in their mom or dad's lap, so they're a little bit supported and they can reach and twist fully onto their tummy to grab those things. And then eventually, we'll touch on this later, because getting from your belly up into sitting, it needs a lot more arm and leg strength, and you'll see that in a couple videos in a couple of slides from now. You'll be able to see how he does that and what we can do to help him get into that position. So sitting independently comes next, and that one, lots of parents get really excited for this one because it's a very independent skill, and babies now have a whole new world to expose themselves to. So every time a baby gets into a new level, so they were on their tummies, now they're sitting, now they're standing, they can experience their world in a whole new way. So you see a huge explosion of what they're learning. So there are more things that we look for as physios just opposed to sitting. We see lots, we like to look for babies that can tip side to side. Can they challenge their base of support? We like to see, are they able to sit and turn their head to look for mom and dad and maintain balance and not fall over? This is a great time to come in for a wellness check. Because on paper, you could have two babies that are independently sitting, and then one, for example, might be able to reach for a toy. He might be able to turn around. He might be able to shake toys and books and things in his hand. And then you might have another baby, for example, who is sitting, but as stiff as a board. If they want to turn, they'll scoot with their legs and their feet, their whole body to turn as one unit, and they won't necessarily be able to separate their body parts. So good time to kind of check in, make sure the quality of their movement is really good. So that is sitting. The next one that's also quick, but a huge building block for later milestones, and this one touches upon getting into sitting from being on your belly. You really want to see babies start to lift their chests right up off the floor around this age. This will help them develop the arm strength needed for crawling, as well as pushing themselves to get into a sit from this position. As they lift their chest up, they're narrowing their base of support, and their balance is a lot more unsteady, and it starts to also work on that one-sided trunk strength. As you can see, like if this babe in the photo, if she lifted her left hand up, all of that body weight is on her right side and really challenging that one-sided trunk strength. So that's a good skill that we look for at this age as well. Now for rolling. Shout out to my family that I was gonna say that I saw yesterday that this video is a perfect example of how to roll with their legs in the air. So as I spoke about earlier, a pre-skill to this was reaching for your hands towards your feet. So you can see how this skill, when he reaches for his toes, transitions into rolling. So this baby is beautifully using his tummy muscles to lift his legs up and then roll over to the side with a weight shift. Now, I challenge you to try to let your babe get their arms stuck. So often after a roll, babies' arms are stuck under their bellies and they have a hard time getting out and they start to fuss. See if you can provide a weight shift to the side of their body as opposed to kind of taking their hand, picking it up and putting it in front of them. Because as they get to learn how to do their weight shifts, they'll get those arms unstuck really well. And you can see he does a great weight shift as he finishes his roll and comes over to get those arms unstuck. However, kind of similar to the sitting differences with quality of movement, you can see that not all babies roll like this. Some babies, especially babies who don't like tummy time, they love to arch their back because they have super strong back muscles, and then they'll roll over a weight shift with an arched back to roll, as opposed to bringing their feet up in front of them and rolling through their front tummy muscles. So again, we want to kind of focus on the quality of movement and the type of roll. So also a great stage to come in and get it checked and make sure that the quality of your baby's movement is good, or to see if there's a better way that your baby can move. And then the last one for this age category is pivoting and pushing kind of backwards on your tummy. That is a really good pre-crawling skill. So these movements start to show babies that, hey, when I push my arms and my legs in a certain direction, I can get to that toy across the room. So they start to kind of spin their body and learn that they are able to move their body in space. This is a great opportunity to start putting your toys a little bit further away from baby so they can start to kind of challenge their bodies to get to those toys.
Okay, we're at the 7 to 9 month window. So this is just a quick list, and we'll be going into each of these with a little bit more detail. So the first one, first skill that you will likely see in this time frame is what we call 4-point. And so this is a really important position to help strengthen the arms, their hips, and getting their joints ready for crawling. when babies first start exploring this skill, what you might notice is that they rock back and forth on their hands and knees. And this is just them like gradually getting stronger and becoming more familiar with being on hands and knees. You can help practice this position if they're not quite getting into it on their own yet, over your leg. So having your leg support their chest and taking some of the weight off. And then this will just gradually help them get stronger. And then once they're doing it on their own, kind of like this photo right here, this is a great time when you can start holding toys up for them to reach for. And it'll just challenge them to lift one hand up and support more of their weight on the other one. So here we're talking about transition. So I know there's been a couple of questions in the chat about this. And so we are going to, how come this video is not working? Okay, so it should load momentarily, but transitions are really important for crawling. So being able for baby to go from sitting on their bums onto their hands and knees really works on the trunk rotation and their core recruitment. And so like Carly was mentioning a little bit earlier, is we may think of this as a simple skill, but it's actually a really important one and a building block for other movements. So when baby's older and starts playing sports, that rotational movement is the same movement needed for things like taking a slap shot in hockey or swinging a golf club. If babies don't get this component of moving, they can get stuck in sitting and start bum scooting instead of crawling. And
maybe try going back one slide and re-coming to it. Maybe that'll help. Yay, technical difficulties. Oh,
we went, hold on.
Spoiler alert.
Here we go. Okay, sorry guys. So this is a really neat video because it's in slow-mo. So you can see here how he's shifting his weight over onto that left hip and coming over that leg, planting his hands, and then getting up onto hands and knees. And so this is a compilation of so many of the skills that we've already talked about today. So that arm strength, that rotation from that started with rolling, that flexed forward position from grabbing their feet when they were in that 4-month range. So many things built upon each other just to get to this transition point.
And I'm just going to jump in quickly. If you can you go back to that video for a sec, Meg? Yep. If you can see how both of his hands are on one side of his leg, that's a really good way to kind of jump on that question that was asked earlier about how do you practice getting in and out of sitting. Putting toys to one side, not in front of a baby, are really good ways to encourage them to start to twist their body to the side like that. Go for it, Meg.
Okay, so then another transition that we want to see is the transition from being on their tummy on the floor into sitting. And so this is kind of like what Carly was just talking about. But we want baby to be able to move easily in and out of different positions on their own. And it requires core strength, rotation, and then the strength through their core muscles and arms. And one thing that you guys can try to do at home is when baby's on their tummy and you want to get them into sitting, I challenge you to help them get there rather than just picking them up and plopping them onto their bum. So if you're not sure how to help baby how to get into sitting, one thing I like to do and suggest to parents is to try and move from that position on your own. So you lie on your tummy and see how you would get onto your bum. And so from this video, what you can see is he pushes up onto his hands and knees and then pushes his weight through his hips back into the side to get onto his bum. So that's kind of the same movement that you would help try to facilitate your baby through to get them into sitting. Okay, so army crawl. So this is another one and we can see that they're learning how to push and pull using their arms and legs. And so they learn how to move farther and faster, and it really helps them explore their environment in a new way. Army crawling helps with developing coordination and the cross-body communication. And then just a tip is now once babies army crawling, they're on the move even more, and so you need to baby proof. High kneeling. So this is, it takes a lot of core and hip strength to get into this position. And so in this picture on the right here, you can see that he's high kneeling at the couch. But one interesting thing is to see how there's no couch cushion here. So the cushion has been removed to create a different level for baby to play at. And that's a good trick to do at home. So if your couch cushions come off, you can create different levels to help baby try new positions and different skills. This here is a play cube, and he's high kneeling here. This is a piece of equipment or a toy that I really like because it lasts throughout several different stages of development. So even before baby sitting and doing, when they're doing tummy time, it's a really engaging toy. Then when they're learning how to sit, they can actually use it for support. And then when they start sitting and kneeling and standing, like this one will last for quite a while. So pulling up to stand.
Sorry, Megan, can I just jump in?
Yeah.
We just had several questions, just going back just a tiny bit to rolling. A lot of babies seem to be doing really well rolling back to tummy, but having a hard time going from tummy to back. Sorry, I know that's showing a few screens back there, but we seem to be having a lot of questions about that. So if you guys got any tips.
Sure. I think what we'll do is we will address that at the end here. Let's try and motor through the rest of these milestones, and then we'll get to those rolling questions at the end. So the pulling to stand, what you can see here is this one. He's using that play cube again. And so like Carly mentioned earlier, is we are looking as physios at the quality of movement. So when babies get into standing, we want them to use the muscles on the front of their bodies rather than stiffening up their back muscles like a board and trying to get into standing that way. So this video here on the right is a really good example of coming forwards and also how the skills build onto each other. So here you can see he's coming into that high kneeling position. He has to shift his weight over onto that right side in order to get that left leg up. So here comes that left leg, and he's gonna plant that left foot and then push up into standing there. So there's rotation, there's the forward flexion movement, and that high kneeling. So all these different skills. And this is also similar to another one of those transition movements. So getting from the floor into standing. And so this is a really good age to get a milestone check, just to see the quality of movement and see if there's any ways that you can challenge baby more, or if there's any adjustments that we can try to implement. And then crawling. So this is so important for hip and shoulder development, hand-eye coordination, and these are all skills that are needed to develop before we get to walking. And so sometimes people think that crawling is not a super important skill. However, we really believe that crawling is so important for the development of babies' muscles and setting their bodies up for more successful movement patterns later in life. So you wouldn't believe how many kids we have come into the clinic with like growing pain type pains, whether it's knee pain or different types of leg pain. And when we ask, we discover that these kids usually haven't developed their hip and core muscles appropriately. And this can cause their bodies to compensate and create this pain later on. So that's just how that really speaks out to how crawling is a really important foundation for baby to build on. Once baby's crawling, it's really good and a fun thing to do to challenge the environment that they're in. So have them climbing up and down over couch cushions, crawling up ramps over top of your legs. And this is a fun video just to show how pulling that couch cushion down and creating different levels again, and letting baby explore. So trying to let them explore on their own and figure out how they can maneuver themselves in their environment, but just staying close just to spot them. So here you'll see Oh, E-tips backwards. Okay, 10 to 12.
So the last stretch of milestones for that first kind of year of life, we start to see some of the big ones like standing and cruising, and we will get to walking shortly. So squatting to pick up toys is a really great activity to improve leg strength, but also challenge balance. It's also so good for hip development. So when babies are born, they have a very shallow hip socket. And the more that kids, as they're developing, the more that they run, the more that they jump, and the more that they squat, that hip socket goes from being really shallow to really deep. So that builds a nice, stable, steady hip. It's also a great exercise for the belly and the bum. So to get those muscles super strong. Babies at this stage love to pick up objects and put them into things. So you can use blocks in a container. You can use whatever baby wants to pick up and put in, and just put it at different heights. And then, encourage them, take the block off the chair, put it in the bucket on the floor, and stand up and sit down and stand up and sit down. And I just saw a question come in saying, should I encourage the pull to stand? We always like to say, if a baby can do it themselves, if a baby can get into standing themselves, then they're ready to start practicing. If you're having to put your baby from sitting into standing and they can't go through the movement themselves, then they're not necessarily quite ready to do it. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And that applies for kind of the movement skills across the board. The next one we see is cruising. So this is also a really good way to build hip strength, but a different kind of hip strength. Rather than the forward backwards movement, it's more the side to side movement. And this is a great skill to get them ready for walking. As Megan was explaining earlier, that weight shift that Babe needed to get into standing is also a weight shift similarly used in cruising. So a big tip for this is keep surfaces low. Coffee tables, couches, flipped over laundry baskets are really good for this. You want them to see them bending forward and down, sort of like this babe is here. You don't want them to kind of be up high, reaching with a stiff, kind of straight body. This is also a great point to say that commonly at this age, grandparents love when babies are starting to walk, and they love to hold their hands up high and to help with baby as they're walking. And sometimes this is basically encouraging those back muscles to work more than the front muscles. So if you do see friends, family, whatever, walking with your babe at this stage, try to encourage them to keep their hands low. So baby's hands are low and in front of them. If you think about us, we don't walk, with our hands up here. We walk with our hands low at our sides. So just think about that when you're helping your babe into these positions or helping them start to walk, keep their hands as low as you can. They won't like it as much and it'll be harder for them, but it'll encourage a better movement pattern for them. Okie doke. The next one is standing and pushing toys. So we're getting really close to walking independently. As I mentioned in the last slide, surfaces are low. So a flipped over laundry basket's great. Here again, you can see that activity cube being used for another milestone. A good tip for this is when it's when they're just starting to push their toys, you can lock the wheels like that push walker on the right. Those wheels tend to lock sometimes, and she's also on carpets. So that slows her down a little bit. So it's not kind of moving away from her and it doesn't demand as much strength. Once they're an expert at the push toys and things like that, you can get them on slipperier surfaces and unlock those wheels. So it's more of them doing the work than the toy. So those are really good activities to help. But again, their hands are low and in front. The next one is walking. Yay, we made it to walking. So what does early walking look like? Typically, it has a really wide base of support. They're super stiff. They don't bend their knees so much, and their arms are up at high guard trying to protect them for balance. As kids improve, you start to see their feet come together more. There's more bending in their knees, and they start to bring those arms down to use them functionally. And then you start to see more skills evolve than just walking. Again, this taps into the quality of movement. You start to see kids that will be walking, but then they'll stop. And then they'll start walking again and they'll maintain their balance. You'll see kids that will walk and turn their head to the side, separating their head from their body and still maintain their balance. You'll start to see kids that will start to walk uphill, start to walk downhill, start to walk on sand, over rocky surfaces, over all different types of challenging surfaces as they get better. And this is great to encourage babies to walk, like get them to the parks. I know it's tricky right now, but get them to the parks, up hills, down hills, over all sorts of different surfaces will be really good to help develop their walking strength. Another good point to touch on right now is footwear. And because it's summer right now, this is going to be really good, but barefoot tends to be best. You want those foot muscles to develop because those foot muscles are going to be the ones that create their arches later on. So if they're in a big stiff shoe, they're not going to be able to use their feet as effectively as if they're, barefoot and able to use their muscles and grip with their toes to develop that strength. So that's one thing. Yes, I understand you have to put shoes on sometimes, and great. What you have to look for when you have a shoe is just pick it up and make sure it's flexible. There's a whole load of information we can give about shoes, but you just want to make sure that it can twist side to side and it can bend when you are looking for shoes. Otherwise, when you can, barefoot is best. And then same thing, we won't touch on this too much because this will go down a rabbit hole, but it's important to note a lot of families have concerns about tiptoe walking, especially with early walkers. So this can be for a number of complex reasons, neurological reasons or sensory involvement. However, a lot of kids do it because they haven't developed their belly and their bums enough yet. So families can be often told, wait a couple years, it'll go away. That is later down the road a lot harder to treat. However, if they're not coming down to their flat feet after 2 or 3 steps, it's something that we can definitely work on to help encourage more hip and belly development to make sure that they're nice, strong muscles so they're not compensating. And the same thing goes for toes that point in and kids that trip a lot. It typically tends to involve their hip muscles not being strong enough yet. Okie doke. So now that we are done, yay, going over all of the milestones, I'd like to ask everyone to write in the chat one kind of take-home message that they found most helpful with milestone development today.
Nice.
Nice.
Let babies do the work. Yes, Robin.
Fun.
Awesome.
Good one.
Yes, wait until they can do it on their own.
What's
Love
our
it.
mom? That is awesome.
Transitions.
Yeah.
Great. That's awesome.
That's a good one. Good takeaway. Nice.
All right.
Okay, so while we're having those come in, I'll quickly talk about one of the most crucial things for encouraging development of milestones is setting up a good environment for babies to explore. One thing that we like to say is you want to have a safe play space, or a yes space is what we like to call it. So something that babies can go around in and you're not saying, oh no, don't touch that. Oh no, don't touch that. Something where they can go and they can explore and lick and put in their mouth, and there's lots of levels, and they're safe if you're a little bit to the side in the kitchen making dinner or something, and you can look over and they're okay to play in that area. That's a huge space. It's a really good way for them to develop it. Another good tip is when your babies are in this space, let them guide the movement, let them explore, rather than you saying, here, play with this toy. And they're like, no, mom, I want to go over here. Kind of guide them, like go with them and explore. And if they pick up a toy, be excited for that toy. If they go to pull to stand at the fence, give them support and cheer for that. That will really help with, your stress levels in terms of how to get babies to do things. And they'll also learn a lot faster because they're able to do the motion themselves and then process that in their head.
Okay. And then just to mention too that we have a blog post on creating a safe play space. So it's on our website. You can check it out there. And now we're getting into baby equipment. So just as a start, before we get into each individual piece, is we like to think of all these pieces of equipment as a tool for parents, as a place to put their baby down if baby doesn't want to be on the floor and you just need your hands momentarily, not as a tool for development. So the first one we're going to chat about is the bumbo. Look at this super cute babe here. Like I mentioned, the bumbo is a place that you can put babe if you need your hands, but not to think of it as helping baby learn to sit faster or sit better, because the position that baby is in is different to how they actually would sit on the floor. One thing with bumbos, we often get asked like, oh, is it worth purchasing a bumbo? And bumbos are really expensive and they aren't used for a very long period of time. So we find that babies grow out of them pretty quick, and then they also eventually can get out of them. And so if it's something that you think would be useful for you, then it might be worth seeing if you can borrow one from a friend or find one on a swap site or something, just so that you're not spending a ton of money for something that may only be used for about a month. We want to make sure that babies aren't put into bumbos until they have full head control in an upright position, and they have that head control on their tummy and can lift their head to 90 degrees. So having this support through their body and their neck is really important, so that they're not slumped over in the bumbo seat. So just making sure that baby's old enough and strong enough before putting them in. Exercisers. So once again, tool for a parent. The big thing with these is to make sure that baby's feet are flat. And so with these, you can adjust the height. So lower them to make sure that baby's feet can be flat on the floor. And if you can't quite get there, then you may need to put a book or something underneath their feet so that their feet are flat. We find that kids who often hated tummy time are the ones that love these, because they can just be upright and they don't have to rotate and they don't have to do any transitions. Similar with the bumbo, we want to make sure that baby has enough trunk control to sit on their own before you put them in here, just so that they're stable and are well supported. The jolly jumper. So this can be a really fun piece of equipment, but it's important also to know that it's not going to help baby walk sooner. It actually uses different muscles and a different muscle pattern than walking, and it gets babies to push more off of their toes. It does give them a good sense of vestibular input, and babies usually like this sensation of moving and bouncing. But it's really, really important to make sure that baby has proper head control. And a good guideline is to wait until baby will actually like hold their legs up and stand pretty sturdy when you hold them in that position, because we don't want to have them in there and flopping around. Baby walkers. So you may have parents or grandparents who have said, hey, I saved this from when you were a kid. Let's bring it out now. It looks like they're ready. These are now illegal in Canada. And so they're very dangerous, especially in homes with stairs. So just note that, and also know that they aren't helping to get baby to walk sooner or be a better walker. We actually prefer the push toys that Carly was talking about earlier, because baby's initiating movement on their own when they are physically ready. So just overall, it's really important to note that the exercisers, the jolly jumpers, and baby walkers do not encourage that flexion or that curled up posture that we've been talking about throughout all of these milestones. They actually encourage baby to use the back muscles and push themselves backwards. And research has shown that this equipment can actually delay baby's development when they are learning to sit and walk. So if, overall, if you're going to use any of these pieces of equipment, we really recommend that it does not exceed 10 to 15 minutes over the entire day. So that's really just putting them in for a couple minutes here periodically throughout the day, and 10 to 15 minutes is not long. Watch out for signs that you should stop using it. And so these signs may include that baby's arching their back backwards. And so this may be when they're in this device, but also if you notice that they start arching more when they're out of the equipment, if they're standing on their tiptoes, and also if when they're out of this equipment, they don't want to sit down. They just want you to hold them into standing rather than being put on the floor. So just some tips. We often get asked, like, when should we see a physio? What do you think? And so these are some key points. So if you notice that there's a lack of variety or spontaneous movements in baby, or that maybe baby uses one side predominantly more than the other, would be worth to get checked out. Babies who get stuck in one position, so they're lacking those transition movements that we talked about earlier, so they may only sit and they can't get in and out of it. Babies who love being on their back and hate tummy time, sometimes it's helpful just to get a few more specific tips on how you can encourage baby to spend more time on their tummy. If there's any milestones such as rolling or other ones that we talked about today that baby has not hit, and it's been like a little, maybe a month or two past when you expect, kind of in that window, then it may be worth getting some tips so that you can start working on them. In babies too, what Carly was mentioning, if you notice they only look in one direction more than the other, it's good to get their neck checked out to make sure that that the muscles are moving okay and that one side isn't more tight than the other. We also do the general motor milestone check-ins to get ideas. And so kind of a check-in at each of the breakdown of ages that we spoke about. So 3 to 4 months, around 6 months, and 10 months. These are really good times because they're kind of at the end of a window and about to learn a whole bunch of new skills. And then we also can catch if baby hasn't picked up skills from the window that they're just leaving. And then also know that there doesn't have to be anything wrong to see a physio. Physios can help you, can help you and help baby to learn to move better. And so we're here as a resource to answer questions and just make sure that baby's development is heading in the right direction.
And finally, just to touch on some pearls of wisdom for today's session, some things that you want to do is, for equipment wise, you want to invest in equipment that you can use across many milestones. So for example, Megan said that activity cube, they could use it when they're on their bellies, they can use it in sitting, they can use it for getting into standing, and they can use it for walking. So that's something that has a large lifespan. Another really good one like that is investing in a good floor mat. You're going to have that floor mat that's, you can put your baby on your tummy. They can start to roll and sit and move and fall onto it. And then it'll be a good play one for when they're toddlers and they need a space to play. That's a good one to invest in. And then creating a safe play space or a yes space, a space where the baby can just go and explore and do things. And then, as I saw a couple people mentioned it earlier, that they thought this was a really good point, was try to avoid putting your baby into a position, but wait for them to do it themselves. And when in doubt, ask a physio who specializes in child development. They'll be able to answer your questions that you have about how your baby's moving and what your baby's doing, and they can help kind of explain it to you in a way that you understand. Ta-da!
So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone across the world for tuning into our talk this morning. If you have any questions that we don't get a chance to answer, feel free to send us an email here. If you want to book a baby milestone assessment, you can call or email us. Most are covered under extended benefit plans and we can direct bill. If you aren't in BC, we can do a video session like Carly mentioned, so it's very similar to FaceTime, and these work really well for the milestone check-ins. And if you do prefer a physical assessment after COVID has passed, then we can help connect you with a pediatric physio that's close to you. If you follow us on social media, Playworks Physio, we give out tips and we post new blog posts on there so you can follow along to stay updated, and also if we are hosting any other webinars. In the next couple of days, we'll send out a summary of everything we talked about today, because I know we went through a lot. And also if your baby isn't quite at the stage that we were talking about, then it might be nice to look back on later. We'll also include a link to a survey, because we would love some feedback from you on what your thoughts are on this webinar, and if there's any topics that you guys are interested in hearing about at another time. And for those of you who fill out the survey, you'll be entered into a draw to win a milestone assessment. So look out for that email. You can print out and keep the summaries that we're gonna give out, and then please take time to fill out that survey. So I know we've run 5 minutes over so far. We will just take another maybe 10 minutes to go through some of the questions that have been brought up in the chat and the Q&A. So if you have time and want to stick around, then feel free to do so. But I do understand that we are at our time limit, so feel free to sign off as well. So Missy, the one question that we had just chatted about earlier was rolling, and it was, can you remind me of the specifics about the question?
Yeah, definitely. So looks like we were having quite a bit of parents that were saying babies that were able to roll from back to tummy, but not tummy to back as easily.
Okay, so this is actually a common thing that we find, is that babies will roll onto their tummy and then eventually they get frustrated of being stuck on their tummy and want to get out of it. And so I know even myself, guilty of this. I'd be like, oh yeah, you rolled and now you're on your tummy and now you're tired, so I'll pick you up and help you get out of it. But one thing you can try to do to help baby learn to roll onto their back is when they're on their tummy and they have their arms tucked underneath them, you can bring one knee up towards their tummy to kind of shift and initiate that roll. And if you hold that knee up to their tummy, then they may actually do the roll themselves through rotating through their trunk. So I would give that a shot. Car, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, the other thing that works really well too is sometimes if babies are on their tummies, they might have their arms wide and out to the side, and that makes it really difficult to roll over that shoulder. So either bringing your hands up and getting them to start to really have their hands like narrow base of support under them so they can kind of tip to the side, or as well, if you see them kind of lean to one side, have that arm up by their head so they can just roll over it that way. Those are little tips as well that can help with rolling from belly to back.
Perfect. And then I did,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just, while we're on the rolling train, I saw a question earlier about babies who are rolling through extension and not flexion, and how they can encourage that that more flexed position. Do you want to touch on that, Car?
Sure. So what tends to happen is babies that really like to spend a lot of time on their backs, they start to learn that their ground is behind them. And they start to learn that when I push backwards, I feel the ground. So those muscles really strengthen. So then as they're starting, the more that they push back like that, they'll also arch their back and lift their body off the ground. And then that becomes tippy. So what happens is they start to learn, okay, I can tip in these positions, and then they'll kind of roll by arching onto their back. So one really good way to kind of encourage movement in flexion or bringing through their tummy muscles is to help bring the baby's feet up. So they're kind of pointing at the ceiling, and push on their feet and kind of play, you can sing a song and shift them side to side. And then you can go like, row, row, row your boat, and, tip over, and then come and bring them back. So they start to realize that when their legs are up in front, that they'll start to kind of tip over that way. What I find that tends to happen is it all becomes down to time spent in positions. So if you have a baby that likes to use their back muscles more than their front muscles, you'll see them use patterns of back muscle movement as they develop until they've spent more time using their tummy muscles. So it won't be an automatic switch. It's all about how much time, like the number of reps per se that they've done. If they've done, 10,000 reps of back extension movements, and they've done, 3,000 reps of forward muscle movements, they have a lot more practice until they start to get and understand and preferentially choose that forward flexion movement. But the more you do it, and especially like Megan said, when you start day one with tummy time, babies will start to get a lot more used to spending time on their tummies, and you'll start to see that shift in flexion forward movement.
All right. There's a question in the chat now about from Lindsay. Your 6-week-old is rolling from back to side, and so sometimes babies will just experiment, and it can be by accident that they actually get onto their side. But it's totally normal, and that's okay. I would just watch that as they practice more, and if they actually are able to roll onto their tummy, then it will be a time to transition out of the bassinet. And then in the chat, Julia, do we have to worry about crawling if it's a hard flooring surface? You know what? No, because babies don't actually have kneecaps. And so it's not as hard on their knees as it would be if we were crawling around. And babies adapt and can figure it out. So my little guy, on our main floor, we have hardwood floors. He crawls no problem. As soon as we go outside onto the patio that is pavement, he figured out that he can pop his bum and knees up into the air, and he does kind of this funny bear walk position because he doesn't want his knees to touch there. So he figures it out and has learned to crawl on various surfaces. So that's okay.
I'd love to touch on, are you finished with that one?
Yeah, go for it.
I'd love to touch on the next question by Elaine. She's basically saying her 3-month-old, when she's on her tummy, takes her hands to her side. We often get this question with families saying, like, my baby likes to stick their hands out behind them and swim. They don't put them in front. And then we'll move them in front and they'll just put them back out again. One good tip that you can do is you can make your baby almost top heavy. So you can put some padding or a pillow towards their thighs and their legs, so they're almost tipped a little bit more down. And then that will kind of send a signal to their body to kind of put their hands out, almost like a protective reaction. And they can start to weight bear, and they'll be more encouraged to weight bear with that. Especially, this one's a good one to do when they're a lot older. You don't really see the swimming babies too much when they're little. So when a baby is, 5-6 months and just really doing swimming arms, make them top heavy. If you have them over your thighs and they're doing tummy time on your thighs, scoot them right forward, almost so they're in a wheelbarrow position. And I did this with a family online actually yesterday, and the baby did a beautiful job, like full on push-up, and it was great. And the mom was like, wow, this is so cool, he's using his arms. So it's sometimes just about adjusting your environment to kind of ensure that that's happening. So that's a good tip there.
There was a question.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I was going to say, one thing we've had quite a few questions on is baby wearing, wraps and slings and such, and how that compares to tummy time, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I was actually just about to say, I'm going to answer this question. So I think, Lauren, your specific question was that you wear your baby, heard it's a form of tummy time, and are there any sorts of benefits or implications of baby wearing? So baby wearing is great. It's a really good way for baby to be close to you, especially if they maybe don't want to be put down for longer stretches of time, and it allows you to do things. It also gets them off the back of their head. And so in that sense, that's really good. I would say that I don't 100% think that baby wearing is a form of tummy time, in the sense that you're not challenging baby's neck strength and like against gravity. So because babies upright against you, yes, they're having contact on their tummy, but they're not necessarily working on that shoulder development and neck strength development. The baby wearing is great, and there aren't really like any like downsides or implications like you were wondering. But the big thing to remember is the fit of, or the position of baby when they're in the carrier. So we really want to make sure that baby has their legs in that froggy position, so knees up towards their tummy, and that the baby's weight is coming through their bum. So the carrier supporting through their bum. What we sometimes see is the carriers where baby's legs are hanging out straight down, and that's putting a lot of stress through their hips that aren't fully developed yet. So just make sure that their knees are up, and then also in moderation. So yes, you can wear them, but also make sure that you're spending time on the floor and getting in different types of playtime throughout the day.
That's a really good one. There's a question kind of jumping on the tummy time train. There's a question from Julia about how long you have to wait a certain amount of time after feeding to do tummy time. It depends. It depends if your baby has a ton of reflex and if they don't. It also depends on the amount of incline. Like if you were to put them flat on the floor, you might get a lot more spit up as if you had them kind of laying on your chest on a little bit of an incline. So use your judgment, use your mommy sense. You know, if you're dealing with a lot of reflux, maybe wait a little bit extra, or do something a lot less, you know, aggressive and, you know, be more on an incline. But the tricky answer is that it really depends. So that's the answer to that one there. And then what other ones do you see?
Let's maybe do 2 more questions, and then what we can do is we will send out the summary, and then maybe some of your answers, if we haven't gotten to them yet, will be in there. And then you also can connect with us outside after this webinar if you have other questions, burning questions that you wanted answered. And I think we'll also take, a lot of these questions are so great, so we will use these questions and answer them over our social media in the next few weeks. So you can also stay tuned that way, and we will go into more detail there, just because I know that we are almost 20 past 12 now. So I'll do one more question, and then Carly can do one more question, and then we will wrap up. Did you see one, Carly, that you wanted to?
Yeah, I see one that I definitely want to answer. This one's from Kathleen, basically saying, my son only wants to sit or stand, but can't get himself into either position. Should I make him lay down and only wait until he learns to put himself in that position? So, great question. We get this a lot. If you just lay him down, he will get very, very frustrated, and he's probably going to let you know it. One thing that I think might shock you is if you modify his environment, you might be surprised as to what he can do. So start, you know, take the cushions off the couch and put them on the floor. Put the coffee table nearby. Get different levels. If the coffee table's too high for him to get him to kneel at, put a mini level in between so he can get himself, you know, from the floor to the pillow, then to the coffee table, and then into standing. And couches are good to practice standing on, but they're also a little bit squishy. So sometimes harder surfaces, you know, corners padded, make sure that, but sometimes harder surfaces are good to help balance as well. And you know, as Megan mentioned earlier, a really great task is if you're not sure how to get your baby into those positions, try it yourself and see like, okay, when I go from my knees to standing, I have to put my foot in front of me and my hands down in front. So do that. And you can also help, you know, guide your baby's hand, put their knee in front, and you can give them a little bit of assistance, but don't put them from A to B. Help them go from A, we're going to move into B, and then get into C. And then that way, one, he won't be screaming at you like, Mom, I want to be in standing. And then two, you can also start to show him how to move. But I think if you challenge your environment or adjust your environment for him, you'll probably be surprised to see that he can get into standing. Go for it, Meg. Last one.
I'm actually going to do 2. Elaine, just really quickly, how to correct a preference for one side direction. I'm assuming that baby is preferring to look in one direction. I think the best thing would be to have a quick check-in, a quick assessment to see why baby is favoring that side. Then that way you can have a specific answer of what's best for your baby and why baby's looking in that one direction. And then Shayla asking about your 7-month-old who does not like being on back or tummy and just likes sitting. Is this kind of like what you just touched upon, Car, or is it's a bit different?
No, I'd say I'd say this is more like stuck sitting.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think for this one, it's important to try to start doing back and tummy time in smaller increments, and know that now baby's 7 months, so they really know what they want and they will tell you, but still knowing that you can challenge them on their back or on their tummy and help them try to roll and learn some of these transition movements to get into sitting. And so that's not to say that no, they can't sit at all throughout the day, but just make sure that you're trying to spend a little bit more time each day and throughout the day of working on being on their back, and try to find different toys that may engage them for a little bit longer, and then helping them get into sitting on their own rather than just putting them there. All right. So I know that there still were a few more questions. We will hopefully be able to answer these in our summary and over our social media. Please feel free to reach out to us, and also reach out if you wanted to book an assessment for your child and get some more specific tips for your baby's age and development. And yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in.
And I did see a question in terms of if we're open right now for virtual. Yes, we have been open and we are open. So it's a long weekend this weekend, but I think most of our physios are back in clinic online doing stuff next week. So give us a shout. We're definitely able to do stuff online, and it's been going really well. So if you're worried about it or not sure if it's a good fit, especially for the little babes, it's a lot of it's education, and a lot of it is stuff like this, and we can show you, you know, how to move your babe and how to set up your environment. It works really well. So you can give it a shot if you're wanting to try some online stuff.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in, and please take time to fill out this survey so we know if there's other topics you guys want to learn about. We'll be happy to host another workshop like this. Have a great long weekend.
Awesome crowd. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys. Okay.
Nice. That was fun.
All right. Okay, I'm going to end our meeting.
Okay, good job. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.